So my name's Morgan. I think some of you probably recognize me from kind of lurking in the shadows of these events in the past. But I'm the marketing and e-commerce director here at Fromage Kitchen. So I'm involved in a lot of the behind the scenes stuff with Voyage Fromage, like marketing, making the little cards, that sort of thing. But today we have Rachel Kleine on the call from the Gray Barn, who I'm going to be interviewing. So I'm just going to ask her some basic questions as we go on to kind of help you guys learn about their operation, who she is, and then we'll walk through a tasting of all 4 cheeses. But please feel free to jump in along the way and ask your own questions. And yeah, to get started, Rachel, I want to learn about kind of your background and your journey to becoming the head cheesemaker at the Gray Barn.
Yeah. So I'm actually the Creamery Director here at Gray Barn, and I've been working in cheese for the past 13 years. My pathway to that was I was in the culinary world, cooking in kitchens back in Kansas City where I grew up. And I didn't see that as a long-term position for me. But I had gone out to this farm about 40 minutes north of Kansas City, Green Dirt Farm, a sheep dairy where they do these dinners that are just so amazing. It's farm to table and everything is cooked and sourced from the farm, cooked right there, and served to people in a way that really demonstrates the labor that goes into making food. That I think sometimes can get so disconnected from us when we're eating on a day-to-day basis. And I fell in love with that. And the owner of that farm happened to be looking for a cheesemaking apprentice. And I took that opportunity, spent my next 8 years there learning everything there was to know about running a creamery. And following that, I branched out and I've worked kind of all over the country now. I've worked in San Francisco, upstate New York, Vermont, and then a year and a half ago, I ended up getting an opportunity to come here to Martha's Vineyard and make cheese at Gray Barn. And that's been a really awesome opportunity. We've got a very small team there's a total of 4 of us. So there's the head cheesemaker, David, who has been here for 7 years and is so talented. And then we have 2 other assistant cheesemakers who are on their way to learning all of the makes that we do. But yeah, that's how I ended up here.
Oh, very exciting. Yeah, we actually sell some of is it Green Dirt Farm?
Yeah.
Some of their cheeses.
They're so delicious.
Yeah, awesome. And it's so cool to see like sheep's milk cheese in the US, which I feel like is kind of rare.
So rare.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about Gray Barn? Kind of like, obviously you're located in Martha's Vineyard, but more about your operation there. Like, I know you guys have like a bakery, and then your kind of mission philosophy.
Yeah, this is a really unique and beautiful place. The proprietors, Molly and Eric Glasgow, had spent some time living in London, and the model of everyone having a garden, growing their own food, and some people even having family cows really kind of steeped into them. And so when they were deciding to move back to the US, they found this old defunct dairy farm on Martha's Vineyard in about 2009. It hadn't been a dairy farm since the 60s, but it's beautiful land and good pasture. And they decided, what if we tried to do a garden and a dairy farm here and make cheese? Because the other aspect of Martha's Vineyard, if any of y'all are familiar, is this is a very seasonal area, right? So we have a population of, I believe it's 17,000 just during the off season, very small, almost rural, very small town feel. But from, you know, Memorial Day on, it's this population explosion, and there's 200,000 people here who need food, and so they were looking for a way to really preserve the bounty of the farm, not just a garden. A garden is great, but finding a way to have a product that could stand up more, and that was the dairy element, the cheese making element. So Molly went to Voyage, which is no longer in operation, but a cheese making school in Vermont, learned how to make cheese. They learned how to be farmers over, you know, after they bought the land. The next few years were spent seeding the pastures and getting everything ready. They had 3 cows, Thelma, Mary Louise, and Nell, I believe. And they just took the time to really learn how to do it and how to make cheese. And then as the years went on, they were able to expand, right? They grew into a much bigger creamery. They built the caves where we age all of our cheese. And then in 2019, they built a bakery, a beautiful bakery where we make bread fresh daily and also pastries. And then on top of that, we have a farm stand, which is really this gorgeous little store that everyone from the island comes and gets groceries at. We carry a lot of local products and collaborate with other producers to make really cool things. And so right now we produce about 40,000 pounds of cheese a year, which is quite a feat. We also bottle raw milk, and that's it for the dairy side. What else were you wondering about?
How many cheeses do you guys make there?
Okay, so we have a repertoire of about 7 cheeses that we make all the time. We have Fromage frais, we have our Eidolon, we have our Banneker, we have Prufrock, we have Bonani, which is a large format wash-drined raw milk cheese. It's very special. It was created for our 10th anniversary. We make Bluebird, which is a Bluebird Reserve, and Banneker, if I didn't mention that one already. But then we also have cheeses that we can play around with. There's a lot of flexibility with that. So we call those mixtapes. And whenever we have new fun ideas, we'll make them and sell them through our farm stand. But those are things you can only get here on the island.
Cool. What's an example of a recent mixtape?
So there's one actually we're developing into a product. So she's still kind of a mixtape, but she also has a name, Ithaca. It's a Alpine style cheese that's kind of crossed with a tome. So it's our own creation, but it's really good for melting and cooking with. It's got that palate that can kind of like enhance what you're serving it with. So we've been working hard on getting that recipe right. Another example is for Mother's Day, we did some really beautiful heart-shaped lactic style cheeses with calendula on top, little flowers, just for fun.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
What was the cheese that started it all for you guys?
Prufrock is definitely our flagship cheese. It Molly drew inspiration from cheeses that she saw in Normandy and also in Ireland, like Goubine, these washed rind cheeses that were made in these like seaside rocky environments that echoed the island itself. But anyone who knows washed rind cheese making knows how difficult it is to really perfect that. So over the course of developing that recipe, and most especially when the caves were first built, when the cheese was being moved into the caves and trying to age out, the rind just wouldn't grow in properly, and it was so hard to get it to work. And they were given some recommendations to stop focusing so much just on the Prufrock and add diversity. So that's when Eidolon came along, and Eidolon was added to the caves. And fantastically, the microflora that was on the Eidolon helped the rind of the Prufrock to grow in. But all that to say, Eidolon was the first cheese that we sold, but Prufrock is definitely our cornerstone and our baby of a cheese, if you will.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
I'm curious about the cows, like how many you guys have and what breeds they are.
So our cows, they are the happiest cows I've been around. We've got about 45 total in our herd. And the way we breed is really strategic so that we try to keep our milk as steady as possible throughout the year because we do make cheese throughout the year. And so right now, I believe we're only milking 38 and some are dried off. And breed-wise, when we first started, we had a lot of Dutch belted, a heritage breed that is under conservation status. But the trick with Dutch belteds, they are a dual purpose breed. So they're made both for meat and milk. And when you have a dual purpose breed, it's wonderful if you're working like as a family and you have one cow, but they don't do either in the most perfect way, so you don't get a lot of milk from them. So over the years, we've had to add in other breeds to help us get our milk amount to what we need it at. And we have now a couple Jerseys, we have a couple Holsteins, we have some linebacks, and still a lot of Dutch belteds and some Normands. So still staying in the theme of sticking with mostly heritage breeds, with a couple Holsteins and Jerseys thrown in, but they're a very fun group of cows. And in fact, in a couple days, we're having the local high school band come and play jazz for the cows and doing a little event here on the island. So that was very fun.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Could you talk a little bit about the fact that you guys are certified organic and like kind of the journey there?
Yeah. Being certified organic is so important to us here because it communicates our values about how we raise our animals and how we make our products. We grow almost between 75 and 80, depending on the season, percent of our own hay here on the island on our land. We mow it. We never use GMOs. Our animals are not treated with antibiotics in the way that can happen in dairy farm settings. It really makes sure that we're not cutting corners in what we're doing. And it's a way to communicate that to the folks who are purchasing our products, that these are our values. This is how we treat our animals. It's high animal welfare, and really doing the best we possibly can to give them the happiest life that they have, and then produce the best cheese and milk for the people purchasing our products. I think I know that they always intended to be organic, and I don't know the exact year we started, but we're certified through Bay State Organics in Massachusetts, and every year there's a big thing where we go through all of our paperwork and the auditors come out, and yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, I feel like it's kind of rare to see organic domestic cheese producer. We don't have a whole lot in our lineup for whatever reason, and I feel like that's really exciting.
It is exciting. I've worked for other producers who were different certifications, like animal welfare approved. And I'll be honest, it's the time and money involved in being organic certified is something that's prohibitive to certain smaller farms. But it's something that the Glasgows were so committed to that it's what we do here.
Yeah. Cool. Does anyone have any questions about the operation or anything?
I have a question about, you say you have a bunch of different breeds of cows. Do you notice a difference in milk from breed to breed? And do you watch how you mix the different breeds' milks together?
That is a fascinating question. And yes, there is such a difference. We don't watch how we mix them together just because that would be so tricky to do. Our farm team milks all into a bulk tank, and just reasonably, it wouldn't work to kind of blend it in that way. But yeah, so like in my personal experience, Jerseys, they have high butterfat milk, right? But those butterfat molecules tend to separate out much more easily. It lends itself really good to butter, right? But we don't make butter here. So when we have a lot of Jerseys who are in milk and they're producing, or they just had calves, so their milk is the highest, you'll notice there's a lot of fat on top of the milk that we're working with. And we have to kind of change our cheese make process a little bit. That's one of the beauties of artisan cheese making. You can see what's in your vat, right? And you can adapt. You can change your stir time. You can change the way you're hooping a little bit to kind of adapt. But yeah, that's one of the coolest things, is they all do have different milk, and their milk all tastes different too from each animal. So that's part of the fun of, and the beauty in artisan cheese, because we're not.
Sorry,
What's that?
no, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Oh, that's okay. Because we don't standardize our milk, and we have a product that changes seasonally anyway, based on what our animals are eating, what's in the pastures. Then the end consumer, you guys, get to taste those differences in each cheese and know that, oh, this one's a little bit more pudgy and runny. I wonder if the milk fat was higher this time because, whatever reason.
Will you be sure to point that out when we're eating later? Because I'd be so curious to know when we're eating, like if it's from a specific cow, or if you don't know, that's fine. But like, I'd be really love to hear that. And my question was, what's your typical day like? I mean, I'm sure it changes all the time, but like, I'm sure everybody on this call has secret fantasies about doing your job.
So the creamery right now, during the summer, when the milk amount is the highest and we're just moving through lots of cheese makes, we pull every 3 milkings. So it's 2 milkings a day, right? So that means we switch every other day. One morning we'll pull early in the morning at 4 a.m. And then the next day, we pull at 8 a.m. to do the make. And then the middle day is off, no cheese make, and then we repeat it again. And that cycle just keeps going until we switch to a different pattern. And when you're transferring milk, you're hooking up some pipelines. It's a really beautiful setup here where the bulk tank has pipelines that go straight over into the cheese house, and with a motor, the milk gets pumped into our big vat. And then if we're making a pasteurized cheese, we're heating up to pasteurization. If we're making a raw milk, we're just heating up to our inoculation temp. You are adding the bacteria that's going to end up fermenting and making the actual cheese. And then there's different processes for every single different cheese. And we'll talk about more specifics as we taste the cheeses, how each one is made. But basically, it's a full, anywhere from 7 to 9 hour day making that one cheese. And then the other fun aspect of our jobs down in the caves is affinage. It's aging the cheeses. So once they go into the caves, if it's something like our Eidolon, it needs to be turned to the bloomy rinds to make sure they don't stick and to pat down the molds. And then the washed rinds, they need to actually be tended to and washed. And so it's kind of like, I love to compare it to houseplants, where you're like kind of looking at the plant to tell what it needs, right? Are you a little bit wilty? Am I overwatering you? What's going on? You look at the cheeses and you listen to the microbes, like, okay, you're getting a little like damp and sticky because it's really humid outside right now. Probably not going to wash you today, going to hold off a little bit. And it's that dance of like trying to understand what the cheese is needing. I love to compare cheese also to like microbe farming, because it's not really you making the cheese, it's the microbes making the cheese. So you're trying to make the best environment for those microbes to grow in. But yeah, that's kind of our day.
Cool. Any other questions before we dive into tasting? All right. So we're gonna taste in order of like least strong to strongest. So we're gonna start with Eidolon, move into Banneker, Proof Rock, and then end with the Bluebird. So if you guys want to kind of arrange your cheeses in that order, And then I have kind of 3 questions for Rachel for each cheese: how it's made, tasting notes, and then her favorite ways to pair it. So if you want to start with how Eidolon is made, Rachel, that would be awesome.
Yeah, so Eidolon is a bloomy rind. There's lots of European cheeses I could compare it to, but really it's its own thing. That's definitely what happens when you're making cheese. They become their own little guys. It's the perfect size for a party cheese. When it gets to that really ripe stage, we love cutting the top off of it so you can spoon it out, and it kind of makes the center of a cheese board like really, really nicely. And making these cheeses is very fun. Once you add your cultures that you need, you add in rennet, an enzyme that helps coagulate that curd, and you cut it into about hazelnut-sized pieces. And you're gently ladling those into each mold as you go. And actually, our Eidolon molds, even though we make them on the scale, so every batch is about 350 Eidolons, they're all individual molds that we're flipping by hand. Like this cheese is truly handmade. After it comes out and is brined in the salt water, we move it down to the caves, and that's when it gets its Penicillium candidum, that white fuzzy mold that's growing on the outside. And as that ages for about 14 days total until its little coat is perfectly in, we are turning these cheeses and patting down that mold to make sure that everything grows in perfectly for us. And with that 14-day age time, it can then, once it's packaged, take another 60 days really and become something totally different than it started. And that is one of the coolest things with this cheese, is tasting it when it's really young. It has a totally different profile than when it's fully aged out and ripe. So like when it's young, I get a lot of citrus, tangy, and this batch is a little bit young that y'all are tasting right now. But a cool thing to do with it is the firm center. You can taste the firm center on its own, and then you can taste that like gooey core that's right around the outside, and then the rind on its own, and really get like a concept for what each of these is doing for the cheese as a whole. The rind is going to be very mushroomy, very like white button mushroomy. And that gooey underneath is very umami and savory. So yeah, it's like a kind of a combination of that right now for this batch.
Awesome. Yeah, how's the texture of everyone's right now? Are you getting like the gooiness and the more awesome? And what are some of your favorite ways to pair Eidolon?
Oh, so there's a couple of fun things. When it's younger and you cut it just full in half, so you have 2 halves, you can put like turbinado sugar on it and flambe it, and then get kind of almost like a creme brulee effect to serve with like strawberries and dessert. But then in the wintertime, what my like go-to comfort is stabbing some slits in the top of it, and putting slivers of garlic and some thyme in there, putting a splash of really dry white wine, and pop it in the oven at like 350 for maybe 20 minutes in a good dish, and serving that on bread just as a lazy, like easy, amazing dinner.
Oh, that's incredible.
Yeah.
Sounds so good. And this cheese is pasteurized, right? Because it's under 60 days.
Correct, it is. Just some straight up good pairing things with it. Dry sparkling is really good. The bubbles really cut the fatty richness and can make it more friendly to pairing with other foods. Blackberries, radishes. So like radishes and butter. I like doing radishes and Eidolon. It's like a step up from that. Walnuts, pistachios are really good. It's a really good summer cheese. I love Eidolon.
Yeah. Yeah. And how does Eidolon change in the summer versus the winter?
So the color will change, right? It gets more rich and yellow in color because when the cows are on fresh grass, they're eating a lot of beta carotene, which then is transferred into their milk, and their milk is that rich yellow. And that's always cool to see, like the difference in pictures of, oh, this was a summertime, eidolon. This is a wintertime eidolon that gets a little more white when they're eating dry hay, right? What other notices? There's definitely some flavor nuance differences. Because from pasture to pasture, there might be wild garlic in one pasture, there might be just a lot of red clover in another pasture, and so that'll really subtly change what the cheese tastes like. And eidolon, because it's it's not a washed rind, it's not a big bold flavor. A lot of the flavors of the milk are just kind of perfectly distilled into it, and you can really get an idea for, this is what the cows are eating right now.
Oh, cool. Great. Did anyone try it with the hot honey yet? I'd be curious how that is.
We had some mango chutney we tried it with,
Ooh.
and I could eat a sandwich out of that in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
Oh,
Ooh, that sounds amazing.
yum.
Sure.
Cool. Well, we can move on to Banneker. If you could tell us how that cheese is made.
Yeah, of course. So Banneker is really cool. It was created during COVID when there was so much milk and they didn't know how to really preserve it long term. And so they landed on making a stirred curd cheddar. So if anyone has familiarity with cheddars, you might know that the cheddaring process of taking a slab of curd and cutting it into little cubes is kind of the namesake of cheddar. But there is such thing as a stirred curd cheddar, where you're not cheddaring the curd, you're not milling it, but you're stirring it in the vat in a very specific way. And they purchased a bunch of cheddar molds and a cheddar press and developed this really delicious recipe. It's got a lot of sweet notes in it. It's very nutty and clean, buttery flavor. And we've actually found that when we age this cheese for about a year, that's kind of its sweet spot. It starts to get crystals. It's really beautiful. So that's how Banneker kind of came about. And I guess that's a bit of the make process too, right? So you're cutting the curd down very small, and then you're using a pitchfork, and you're really like working that curd in the same way that the cheddaring process would help it be acidifying and getting to the right texture. You're just doing it a little bit different with the stirring method. We have just started this past spring making a couple of flavored types of Banneker to start to explore that. So we did a sage, we did a peppercorn one, and we might branch out from there. We'll see how they age out, which is very fun. But yeah, so we aged this. Our target age is about a year, and it is vacuum sealed. That was the decision with COVID, like knowing that we could hold on to this product for a while. We do have baby dreams of sometime doing a natural rinded, like bandaged cheddar, but that's long time away. But the flavors for Banneker, so you get nutty, you get sweet, you get clean cultured butter, and a nice salt. And it's a really approachable cheese. It's perfect for our farm stand, for families who come in with kids who really want something at the beach that even the youngins will like. And it pairs well with sweet apples and mustard on rye. It makes a good little like plowman's lunch with some meat. It pairs well with ciders. I really like it with ciders.
How does it melt for a grilled cheese?
It melts pretty well. It's got a little bit higher salt, which can sometimes make it break a little bit, but especially if you add it into a grilled cheese with one more really good melter, it's going to be perfect for you. Our bakery actually makes croissant with Banneker in it. That's really delicious.
Oh, that sounds so good.
Yeah.
Wow. I'm trying to like formulate this question. I'm wondering like if the stirring of the curd versus the milling and stacking and cheddaring affects the texture of the final product at all.
It does, and it affects the pH curve. It's
Okay.
definitely stirred curd cheddar is definitely a different cheddar than regular. And we waffle back and forth about, we don't necessarily call Banneker a cheddar all the time. Like on its label, it just says Banneker. It's its own cheese, right? But it certainly does. It's not, you know, if you tasted a cheddar side by side with it, you're going to notice the differences.
Interesting. Could you talk a little bit about how you guys name your cheeses?
Yeah. So almost all of our cheeses are named after poems. Eidolon is named after Walt Whitman's Eidolons, which is beautiful, and it's kind of like an image of an ideal, right? A specter. Our Prufrock is named after the love song of J. Alfred Prufrock. And that is like such an existential crisis, like heavy poem, right? And it kind of fits with the cheese, because the cheese is a little like angsty and like it can hold up to that. Our Bluebird is named for John Burroughs' Bluebird, which is a poem about a harbinger of spring, which is really beautiful and lovely. And Banneker was named in a naming contest, and it's for a Rita Dove poem, an African-American poet laureate, about a man named Banneker, who I also believe was a writer. And our Bon Anniversaire is not named after a poet. It was just our 10th anniversary cheese. And our Fromage Frais wasn't named after a poet. But everything else, it's very, very literary and sweet.
Cool. I love that.
Yeah.
All right, we can move on to Prufrock and how that's made.
Prufrock. So Prufrock is our darling. Prufrock actually just won a Good Food Award a couple months ago. We were very proud of it. And it is a wash rind, small format wash rind. So this cheese is pasteurized, and then the culture and the enzyme, the rennet, is added, and it coagulates, and we cut it down to a really specific size, and then we keep that curd stirring until it gets to the right texture and moisture, and during that time we slowly heat it a little bit, and after it goes into molds and is brined, it goes down to the caves, and it spends about 3 weeks down there where we are washing it and trying to get that perfect rind to grow in. It's pudgy, and it's salty and savory, and you can really taste kind of the sea air that where we are on Martha's Vineyard in Chilmark. It's up island, and we get a lot of the morning fog that rolls in off the water, and there's like almost that taste reminiscent from the rind in a really beautiful way. Prufrock's got a lot of meatiness going on, so it's kind of like a lot of wash rinds. Like wash rinds were one of the stories of how wash rinds came about were back in the 16th century. Monks, after the rule of Benedict, couldn't eat meat, and they were looking for something to satiate that craving. And they found that when they washed their cheeses in their ales, it would mimic that flavor. And wash rinds really do. When you're getting that end product, you're tasting it, and you're like, oh, I can taste like, cured ham in this. It does really echo that in a cool way. Pairings for proof rock that I really like, saisons or like fortified brandy wines. It can stand up to bigger. I'm a beer person, if you could tell. I don't have as many wine pairings, but it can really stand up to a strong pairing. Whiskey, it will go with like good whiskeys. Stone fruit pairs really well. Think apricots, nectarines. There's also, when it's young, it's got a really nice like yeasty bread dough hint to it, that I love putting into like omelets as a like breakfast option. Ooh, melting on the asparagus. I know asparagus season is almost over, but it's good. It's very good.
Oh, I love that idea.
Mm.
Have you guys ever washed it with anything other than a brine?
We have. We over the years done a lot of experiments with beer washes. We have a brewery here on the island offshore, and we're looking to do another pairing with them where we're washing a whole batch with their beer, because it really just creates a whole nother level to the cheese that's really beautiful.
Oh, cool.
I have a question. You make a wide variety of cheeses. How often do you switch between cheese when you're making it? Do you make it for like a week? Like, do you make proof rock for a week and then make the Banneker for a week, or how does that work?
One of the things I love about this place is we're making different cheese every day, so we never get bored.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you could make 2 or 3 cheeses in a day?
In a week.
In a week.
In a
Okay.
week, yeah. And that more has to do with patterning how the cheese will sell. So if we did a whole week's worth of proof rock, we would have too much and we couldn't sell it fast enough. So we do like two proof rock makes a week, 1 Eidolon, a raw milk make that'll switch back and forth depending on our need, and then we'll throw in a fresh make of making fromage frais.
And we can move into Bluebird, and how that's made.
Okay, so Bluebird is probably my favorite cheese we make, at least right now. It is such an original cheese. It is a blue, roughly based on a Stichelton recipe, but has some cheddar influences. It's a natural rind, and it's in a cube shaped, which all of that together just makes it its own unique, interesting product. And I've actually had the opportunity a few days ago to get to talk to the person who developed that recipe, one of the original cheesemakers. And she was talking, she is originally like a chef in her heart. That's what she does. And she wanted to make a blue that didn't knock out your palate completely, that could be used in cooking and wouldn't take over in such a big way. And I think she really, really managed to achieve that. When we're making Bluebird, the way you make a blue is you take that curd after you've renneted it and you really break it down into these tiny little, you tear it apart into these tiny little pieces, and you're stirring and you're draining off whey and you're stirring some more. You're really trying to dry out that curd for this particular recipe. And also just that fantastic shape, that cube shape, I think is so beautiful. Yeah. Once the cheese comes out and is in its molds, it actually stays there for 2 days while it continues to drain more. And once the molds are removed, blue mold needs oxygen. And so the way we achieve that beautiful marbling throughout the wheel is by actually piercing it, stabbing it with these like prongs several days after, once the blue is starting to grow on the outside, and letting that oxygen in, letting the opportunity for that to grow. Our blues are aged at least 90 days. The The batch I sent out to y'all, I think, is about 5 months old. So it's got some age on it. And when you're tasting it, you might notice that piquant starts to kind of go up your nose a little bit. Very savory. It's got some like almost shiitake undertones of mushroom, and then some red fruit, like dried red fruit. My favorite things to pair it with, I like it with scotch, a nice smoky scotch. Port is an amazing traditional pairing. Stout beer, it's really good with. Dried cherries, toasted bread, because I feel like it also has these brown butter toasted bread notes in it as well. Figs and candied nuts. Bluebird is very special to us here. We really love it, and that natural rind, if you get a piece with rind on it, be sure to taste that, because that adds this really beautiful earthy quality to the whole experience.
So I actually, for some reason, thought it was ash, but it's actually blue on the outside then?
It's a combination of a million different things.
Oh, okay.
So, and depending on the batch you get, some of them have more Penicillium candidum, I'm assuming. I've never plated and isolated it to see what microbes it is, but I'm assuming that because it does age in our howar with the bloomy rinds. There'll be some gray mold, there'll be blue mold. There's all different sorts that grow in there. And that's what I mean. It really adds to that flavor experience, because you're tasting what our caves taste like when you're getting that rind.
Cool.
Yeah.
And what makes Bluebird Reserve?
So Bluebird Reserve is aged almost twice as long. When we're making the cheese itself, we make it a little larger, a lot drier, so that it can withstand that aging. And it is a strong cheese. I was talking about how regular Bluebird, the goal was to be able to have it still be accessible in cooking. Bluebird Reserve is a standalone, eat for dessert, like savor cheese, because it's a big flavor. It's got a lot of caramel, smoky, almost tobacco flavors, and it also is a cool experience. But yeah, the goal with that was to get to see what happens to our Bluebird when we get that age on it.
How, this is like maybe more of a general blue cheese question, but how do you get more of like the fudgy texture of a Bluebird versus like a crumbly or more loose texture?
I do have to be honest, I'm not the most experienced in blues. Bluebird is the only blue I've made.
Okay.
But just in my experience with that, from batch to batch, getting a more crumbly versus a dense fudgy, which is kind of what we're going for, it for this make depends on how much you're drying it out when you are making it. So when you're making a cheese, your hands are in the vat, you're feeling the curd, you're taking pH, you're kind of taking stock of all of these data points that can help you kind of guess how it's going to age out. So if you get a little over acidified or you get a little too dry on that blue, you're going to end up with a more curdy, crumbly product versus that really beautiful, dense, fudgy, creamy. And this blue, when it gets to the right stage, will have the crystals in there too, which is also really lovely.
Awesome. Anybody have any questions after tasting through all the cheese? Is there anything that you guys are planning like for the future that you're excited about? Or sorry, Clifford, did you have a question?
We just wanted to say thank you, Rachel and Morgan, for the questions. But Rachel, you know so much, and I've learned so much.
Yeah, it's been great.
Fascinating. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Definitely.
We had a blue cheese on one of these tastings a while back that was made from Gruyere milk. that I didn't think anything would top, and your blue's amazing.
Oh,
Good.
thank you.
Yeah, that was a Blue de la Gruyere from Switzerland,
Mm.
one of our favorites. But I have to agree, Bluebird is so spectacular.
Right up there, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think I can pick a favorite. So how we use your cards is we keep all the ones that we know we love, and the ones that we didn't, that weren't quite winners. I mean, right? Like it's a different kind of scale when you're buying cheese from you, right? Like, so it's like, here's the rest of the cheese, and then here's the scale for the cheese we get from you. And then it's like on this end. And so those are the ones that we save so that when we go to order, like we can make intelligent choices based on all the things we've tried. And so these will all go up on our little board of cheese possibilities as we are. So thank you. So, and I love the cards. We love the
I
cards.
love it. Great.
You asked if there's things I'm looking forward to on the farm. I think we're gonna participate at the end of this month in the Cheesemonger Invitational as a sponsor. If anybody's familiar with that, it's this really cool cheesemonger competition that is just full of everybody in the cheese world and a really fun time. So really looking forward to going to that.
Yeah, we're actually sending 2 of our cheesemongers there to compete this year. So
I think one of them got Proofrock for their perfect bite, actually.
nice.
So that'll be fun. And then on the farm itself, summertime is just always one of the most amazing seasons here on the island, with just so many people and the opportunity to play around with whatever, because folks want to try it and want to taste it. And so I think just this whole summer is going to be exciting.
Do you live on the island year round then?
I do. Because we make cheese year round. And actually, so one of the challenges on Martha's Vineyard is housing for employees.
Yes.
Yeah. So something that Eric and Molly have worked really hard at is providing housing to all of us.
Wow.
Getting on and off the island in the summer is brutal.
It is. It's hard to even get a ferry.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. But luckily there's enough work to keep me here for the most part. So
Great. Any final?
Rachel, thanks so much. Do you take visitors on the farm? We usually come out to Aquina, that direction.
oh yeah. Aquina is the best part on the island, by the way. But we definitely do. So we do private cheese tastings if you go on our website. We also do combined cheese tastings if you don't have a group of 10, where you can tag on to somebody else and they'll be guided, and it'll be a combination of pastries and breads and our cheeses. Or you can just come out to the farm stand and walk around, and there's big viewing windows into the creamery and into the milking parlor so that you can see the inner workings of everything.
Oh, that would be wonderful. Thank you. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you all. I'm so glad you guys came.
Yeah, thank you so much. This was so informative, and I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us about your incredible work.
Yeah.
Great. All right. Well, thank you so much, and I hope everyone has a great day.
Enjoy the rest of the cheeses.